This video is sponsored by PCBWay.
Hey there, this is Seth Schaefer from Team Just Cause Robotics, and I finally have something approaching a real backdrop behind me, though it's still going to be a bit of work to get it to a finished state. At least I've got something back there that looks decently presentable for now. I'm going to be talking today about how my 3-pound robot Subtraction performed at the March 2nd NHRL event in Norwalk, Connecticut. So going into this event, Subtraction changed quite a lot from MassDestruction in December till this March event. So March was the first time that any robot that has competed before NHRL could compete this year, since they have a new bots only event in January, and March was the next event following that one. So for March 2nd, I decided to redesign Subtraction. Now, I also brought Subtraction to the December MassDestruction event, which you can find a link below, or I'll probably put a card above to that video if you want to see how it did. That was what I would call Subtraction version 1, and the version of the bot that competed at March was this one, which is Subtraction version 2. Well, this is part of it anyway. So the basis of Subtraction version 2 is this single-piece billet machined aluminum chassis, which is why I made a big deal about it being, all metal. This was manufactured by my friends over at PCBWay, who sponsored this video and sponsored the bot by giving me a steep discount on these. They were still very expensive, mind you, but that was mostly my fault because I ordered the parts pretty last minute and they had to deliver them to me within just over a week from when I ordered. Normally for CNC parts, you want to leave a 2 or 3 week turnaround time, especially for ones coming from China. But PCBWay did a fantastic job with this, and you'll see how it performed during the event. This is one that was not used on the robot. I had a second one that they made for me. That was the one that the robot actually competed with. So yeah, chassis worked great. PCBWay does great work. Check them out at the link in the video description for $5 off your first order. Subtraction version 1, the version that fought at NHRL in, I think it was September, and then in December of 2023 at the MassDestruction event. Those were both based heavily on SSP, which is the 3-pound 4-wheel drive lifter kit that I sell, basically replacing the servo lifting arm with a giant custom weapon motor that I sell on my website called the JCR 4935, which you can buy now, by the way. So that weapon motor is heavily modified to be beefy enough to survive delivering hits directly to other 3-pound combat robots without exploding and having all of its magnets and bearings shatter and die. This is a thing that you might see later in this video happens when you use an unmodified motor to mount a weapon to in the 3-pound weight class, though in the 1-pound weight class you can definitely get away with it, as I showed with my 1-pound bot Sonic. By the way, Sonic just competed at Maker Battle. I got a ton of fights, and I'll have another event recap coming up showing how that went. So make sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notified when that video comes out. And if you join my Patreon, which you can also find linked down below, you'll be able to watch all of my fights from that event right now. All right, moving on without the self-promotion here. Shameless self-promotion is actually what SSP Kit stands for, so I, have to be a little bit self-aggrandizing here and there. So Subtraction version 2, I, instead of using the body from the SSP Kit, made a custom body for a few different reasons. Number one, the bottom of the UH&W billet that the SSP Kit uses is a little bit too flexible. It's like an 1/8 inch thick plastic. Aluminum is much, much stiffer than plastic, and this bottom is the same thickness, but obviously it's pocketed down to about 50 thousandths of an inch thick in some areas so that I could save some weight. But still, this body is way heavier than SSP's chassis is, because UH&W plastic, or ultra high molecular weight polyethylene, is about 3 times less dense than aluminum. So with the same amount of material, this would have been 3 times as heavy. I cut a lot of material out, as you can see with all these pockets and things, but this was still, a bit less than twice the weight that the plastic body would have been, even though it's shrunk and thinner walls and I pocketed out some material. So There was still not a ton of weight left for the weapons, so the weapons I used on this bot were relatively lightweight for the 3-pound class at 170 grams or so. Like this one, for example, which has a 9-inch effective reach, is an asymmetrical weapon, so it spins about the center point here. And this blade tip is 4.5 inches from that center point. So yeah, I designed brand new blades going into this event. I designed the new chassis going into the event, designed all new forks and side armor setups that could be 3D printed from TPU and bolted together. I tried to water jet cut some AR500 front forks, and they all fell between the slats of the water jet at the makerspace, so I could never retrieve those. So I ended up 3D printing polycarbonate forks, which kind of came back to bite me later. But, you know, such is life, I guess. Doing everything super last minute sucks. So going into my first fight, I was actually going to be fighting Tomato Soup, which happens to be an SSP kit. Surprise, surprise. Let's see how that fight went.
3, 2, 1, fight!
Right at the start of this fight, I make a critical driving mistake here. Hitting Brett the Brick is pretty much the worst thing I could have possibly done, because Brett is a 60-pound steel brick, and the walls are guarded with USW and are generally a lot softer to hit. Hitting Brett that hard, I think actually bent the blade on my robot and made it so that it was no longer properly balanced since it's an asymmetric design, meaning that from this point on I basically couldn't run the weapon above 50% throttle or the bot would tumble around like crazy. I'm really glad I added this silly looking cone to the top of the bot, because it does actually make self-righting work, which is a problem that I have with the last version of the bot. Even though I'm using crappy polycarbonate forks, fortunately the wedge on Tomato Soup was actually raised up so that I would be hitting it with my blade, and that meant that they had basically no ground game whatsoever, so even though the plastic forks aren't very sharp, they could easily get under. And here again, thankful that I have that self-righting cone. I'm desperately trying to get a hit on the back of Tomato Soup, even though they are actually using the slower Gecko drive motors, so my bot's a lot faster. It's still difficult for me to consistently get behind them.
1 minute!
You can see how much the bot's vibrating around the higher weapon speed I have, which makes it just next to impossible to drive. I intentionally shut off my weapon here so I could just do a pin, because if I can't really do any damage since my weapon's barely functional, I can at least get control points. This is an example of what happens when I try to spin the weapon too fast.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
SSP kits are very durable, and I definitely proved that with this fight, though I wish my weapon had been going faster so I could show what damage it could really do. So yeah, that fight didn't go super well. I did end up winning the judge's decision, but I definitely struggled to keep my weapon running at full speed, and that was unfortunately going to be a sign of things to come. As far as damage, though, I didn't really have to do much of anything. I actually gave the bent blade to Marley, who's the driver of Tomato Soup, as a trophy for her to take home, but I had to swap it for a fresh one after figuring out who my next opponent was going to be. I brought several blades with me to the event. I had an 8-inch one that was a bit stockier that was meant to fight vertical spinners, so it's harder to bend out of plane than the longer, thinner blades. And then I also had the 10-inch huge, like, aura blade, I call it, that I had run at MassDestruction in all of my fights. But that aura blade was also pretty easy to bend. I'd bent one of them at MassD, and the second one I had I think was slightly wonky from hitting my test box wall, but would still spin at least. It turns out my next opponent was going to be a vertical spinner called Skew, so I switched to that 8-inch chunky blade and decided to have at it.
My next opponent is Skew, which is some kind of two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive vert. I have to try and find it exactly, but they beat Dysfunction, which means I have to face them because I beat Tomato Soup. So I've got my 4 forks set up. These forks are going to be pretty much useless at being defensive forks, but at least if I get around to the sides or back of them, I should be able to get under them. Got the side skirts on so they can't bite straight into the aluminum. I did not put in the 2 top screws because if their vert hits those top screws, that'll do way worse damage than just hitting the TPU, but I put 1 in just so that this isn't super floppy on each side. I'm using my thinner side guards instead of the thicker ones, just save a little bit of more weight. I don't really need it, but these also look a little bit nicer because I've rounded over the corners, whereas on the thicker ones I had to like chop that off because I forgot about that when I was designing it. But yeah, should be pretty much good to go. I've got the 8-inch blade on there. Oh, the motor I think I need to tighten up. That's a lot of vibration. Gotta tighten all those bolts.
3, 2,
Skew, it turns out, is a really interesting robot with the weapon skewed off to one side, hence the name, and it's got a really thick, chunky looking vertical spinner, so I've just got to do my best to not hit the weapon. Good engagement there. Ouch. Once again, self-riding cone to the rescue, but my blade is off balance again. You can't really tell from this camera angle, but my blade is wedged in between his top plate and chassis, like under the top plate here. And it turns out I actually cut the power wires between his battery and his power switch, and that completely disabled his robot, so this was a KO.
that's a takeout! Winner, Subtraction!
My name is Alex Cook, and this is Skew. In our fight, we went head-to-head, weapon on weapon, several times, bending the spring steel wedge at the front, but relatively no damage on the rest of the structure of the bot. However, the weapon on Subtraction went right underneath the Garolite top plate, right above my aluminum towers, went into the wires of the bot, and disconnected here from the JST connector the battery from the system. So I lost power on everything, but nothing's damaged other than that. On one weapon-to-weapon conflict, if you can see there, my weapon got hit into my weapon motor, and I sheared my own axle, so I lost weapon somewhere in the middle of the fight, and then lost everything from the battery.
It was a really good fight.
Awesome.
I was happy that you made me really test the self-riding, because when I was stuck, I was like against the wall like this, and I was like, this is like one of the worst positions to get stuck in. So I got back in it. But yeah, on my frame, I don't think you really hit me anywhere except the weapon.
Nope.
And tip's like a little distorted, but it's nothing too crazy. In the last fight, I chopped this off myself because the screw came loose.
Yep.
But yeah, I think it was pretty much just that one Wayne weapon to weapon, and then me going into the back of your
Awesome. What was up with your weapon motor?
I think this is bent. I think that the counterweight might have bent over and it was out of balance.
Yeah.
But still, the weapon motor seems fine, still spinning, but yeah, this blade might be trash.
It's a good testament to your electronics.
I'll keep it for now, but if I end up completely destroying this blade later, then I'm gonna give it to you. Because it still works at up to like 70% throttle.
Awesome. Well,
great fight.
That was awesome. All right, see ya.
See ya.
I figured while I bore you with discussing what happened in that last fight, since you already watched the interview, I'll show you yet another fight. This one was between Omnius, which is a 3-wheeled omni-wheel drive or Kiwi drive bot using my brand new hub motor that you can buy at justcauserobotics.com against Master Control Bot, which is an SSP kit heavily modified with a custom TPU body. So you can check out that fight as I'm talking. So yeah, the fight against Skew didn't go exactly how I had planned it. I did get the weapon-to-weapon exchange I was hoping to avoid, and it did bend my blade once again. Though again, it seemed like the blade bent in plane instead of like bending up like you might expect, but it was enough to put it off balance. I think the counterweight ribs were too thin, and it shifted the counterweight so that it was no longer, basically had a center of mass directly over the pivot point, and that meant that if I ran the weapon past 70% throttle, the robot would vibrate and tumble all over the place. This is probably exacerbated by the fact that because I wanted Subtraction to be able to hit lower than its chassis height, I actually have the blade angled 2 degrees towards the front, so it hits a bit lower in the front than it might ordinarily if the blade was flat. In any case, I was moving on into the bracket now because NHRL has their event set up such that if you win 2 preliminary fights, you end up seeded into the bracket. And in the bracket, I had to face a bot named 1-2 Punch. 1-2 Punch is a dual undercutter bot. It's a brand new bot with a brand new builder who actually told me he's a fan of my channel and loves watching my videos and learned a lot from them. That said, 1-2 Punch had a very unfortunate run at this event. Their first preliminary fight that they had, they lost, but both of their other preliminary fights ended up being forfeits. So he advanced into the bracket without having won a single fight when you're supposed to be 2-0 or 2-1 going into the bracket. So I felt kind of bad that he'd have to go up against Subtraction V2, which is kind of dialed in, pretty competitive bot with a veteran driver, myself, in his first, or second real combat robot fight ever. But he wanted to keep the fight going and wanted to get hit hard and learn what it's like fighting a veteran, so that's what I did. Let's see how this fight went.
Let's go, let's go, let's go!
Alright, Subtraction, are you ready?
Yeah, let's go!
1, 2, 1, are you ready?
Whoops.
Page 7, the action begins in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fight, robots, fight!
I didn't see that coming. I'm stuck in him. Oh! Uh-oh! I might have hit a battery there.
Alright, we're gonna try. Before we resume, Subtraction, can you make your way onto the RL? Thank you. 1-2 Punch, are you ready? Subtraction, are you ready? The action begins in 3, 2, 1. Fight, robots, fight! 1-2 Punch, punch it.
Set to hit him.
Your winner is Subtraction! Are you down here?
Yes, you're going to tell me where to go next.
Yeah, I'll go with you.
Yeah, perfect.
That was a lot of fun, dude.
That was awesome. I had it.
Thank you.
That was the best fight I've had today. I had against Forfeit, so it's disappointing. That was great. My problem when I went are tiny screws.
Yeah.
Every time I hit anything, they fly off. So I got to figure out a solution.
That's why I have a custom motor for mine.
Yeah, you sell them?
I do.
Oh, do you?
The M5 bolts to put the weapon on.
I'm gonna have to check that out then. I got your
Put weapon locks in and power down your robots.
Pieces everywhere.
So that went well for me. Definitely tore 1-2 Punch apart. but he was a good sport about it, so that was a lot of fun. Next up, I had to fight a two-wheel drive drum spinner I'd never heard of before called Scrambled. This bot is super low to the ground and was going to be really, really hard for me to fight against, mainly because my blade is on top of my robot, and robots that are too short, I just can't really hit them at all. So here I realized I basically could maybe barely skim the top of this bot's wheels, but my blade couldn't really make contact with anything else on my opponent. So without any AR500 forks, this was going to be a massive uphill battle, since I knew that the moment he hit the polycarbonate forks I was forced to run, they would pretty much disintegrate, and I'd be left with no ground game. So I was just going to have to try and be aggressive and control the fight as best as I could. Let's see how this one went.
Scrambler, are you ready? Subtraction, are you ready?
Alright, here we go. It's gonna be brutal.
So my strategy here is pretty similar to against Skew, which is to not go weapon on weapon and try and drive around to the back and sides of his bot, since if I can hit anything, it's just the wheels peeking out. So I don't want to drive face first into him and lose all of my forks right away, since that's something I might be able to use later, to actually get under him and push him around. Lost two of the forks there. And there go the other two, so now we're really screwed. As I suspected, my blade's skimming over the top of his bot, but I can still push him into a wall and get control and aggression points. Once again, looks like my blade is off balance because it was bent in the Skew fight. Using Dartbox Dragon motors and smaller versions of the grippy Vitaflex tires the SSP kit uses, Subtraction's basically a control bot, but with a big blade on it.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
So something really bad happened during that last exchange. When Subtraction went on top of Scrambled, its drum kind of hit the back corner of the chassis with the drum kind of going straight backwards, and it bent in a corner, locking up a wheel on my left side in the back. So now I only have one side of drive. So yeah, perhaps unsurprisingly, I lost the judge's decision there. NHRL changed up how they judge fights for this year, not in the scoring rubric necessarily, but in how judges actually look at the fights. So normally there'd be 3 judges with 3 scores for damage, control, and aggression. And if you get 2 of the judges voting for your bot with more points, then you win. This time around, they only have 2 judges look at the fight, and then only if they disagree do they bring in a 3rd judge for a split decision. In this case, it was unanimous for Scrambled, unsurprisingly. One judge gave me 1 damage point out of 6, and the other gave me 0 out of 6. But we both tied on control from both judges, and it was a 2-3 split on aggression, going one way from one judge and the other way from the other. So basically how you might expect that to have gone. Once I lost the drive side, I couldn't really do much with Subtraction, unfortunately, to win that fight. So people always told me they wanted to hear about the repairs after my last division event report, so I'll talk a little bit about that. So basically, what happened in the Skew fight, this piece was bent in a lot further than you can see it now. Just this back corner got bent in from a hit on the bottom of it. It got bent in like this. I brought it down to the NHRL shop, and while we were there, with a pair of wrenches, Eamon helped me, the old guy in the shop who helps out everyone with their repairs. He got a pair of wrenches and was able to kind of slowly pry this out to the point where it was mostly unbent, and then using the arbor press and some hard metal tools, I was able to kind of bend it out most of the rest of the way, so the wheel was able to clear it again. Had to replace that burnt out drive motor. I think I actually forgot to do that going into my grudge match, which was coming up next, but I had to replace that smoked drive motor since it was locked up for so much of the fight and it had started to overheat quite a bit. Other than that, though, wasn't really any damage, besides you can just see all of the nicks and scratches all over the chassis. So it did hold up pretty well to the abuse, and this design wasn't too bad overall. You can see I did lose in I think the first fight of the day, this screw head got ripped off, so I can't extract that screw anymore. And that corner of the chassis got the lid rather, got messed up. But otherwise, the bot was pretty much unscathed through all of the fights. The motor was still working. It was a little bit wobbly. I found that I think the epoxy between the stator and the internal structure of the motor broke, but that was easy enough to fix with some green Loctite and just shoving it back together. So brought the robot into one more grudge match just for fun against a bot called the Reaper, which is also running the same JCR 4935 weapon motor that Subtraction's running, but his is belt driving an absolutely insanely huge weapon. He was having a bunch of issues with his bot earlier in the day, though. It doesn't actually have wheels. It's supposed to be like a bristle drive, but it can't exactly move almost at all. So yeah, but why don't you check out the fight and see how it went. I tested the bot going into this fight, and the wheels were spinning just fine, but with any load on them, it turned out that the motor that had smoked during my last fight was just not really keeping up with the power requirements to drive in a straight line for very long.
You won so many battles.
Yeah, I won. This is the fourth win today. But
Fourth win already?
yeah, but I got knocked out of the tournament, so this is just for fun.
So yeah, Subtraction version 2 hits pretty damn hard. It's pretty durable, though that back corner of the chassis is obviously a weak point, and that's something I want to change for a future version 3. So my plans going forward are to redesign Subtraction again. I've actually already, for the most part, done that. In fact, the reason there are no guts in the version 2 chassis I showed earlier is because they are all in this prototype, which is 3D printed, of what version 3 should look like. So basically, a battery takes up pretty much 100% of the leftover space in here. And then I've got the receiver, a Just Cause Robotics Switch PD board instead of the motherboard now, so I was able to shrink everything widthwise and lengthwise. And then the 70 amp weapon speed controller and the 4935 motor, same as I was running before, because they just have been working super well. I've got like some wedge mounts on here, but basically you can see how much smaller it is this way. These black pieces are add-on armor, so the chassis itself is quite a bit smaller in X dimension and the Y dimension. It's pretty much the same height-wise. This is going to be a 1.1 inch tall aluminum body, and this is, I think, pretty much about the same. But a lot less pocketing on the bottom, basically none. And I was able to cut so much weight out by just basically removing those back corners of the body and shrinking everything that this has about 100 grams of weight savings from the body that I can put back into the blades and the armor package to make it way more, you know, powerful and at least able to deliver hits consistently without bending my blades every single time. So what's next for Subtraction? Well, I have Subtraction registered for the Bot Brawl event, which is going to be May 25th and 26th in Toronto, Canada. However, I'm not sure if I'm going to bring version 2 to that, or the new version 3 if I get the chassis in time. They're being made by PCBWay right now. I should get them in time, but I also have Subtraction registered for the June 1st Teams event, which is going to be a really high-profile event, and I definitely want fresh bodies going into that one. So I'm not sure if I want to risk them getting damaged at Bot Brawl. I might end up running Subtraction version 2 again at Bot Brawl, or potentially just bringing SSP or another of my 3-pound bots. Maybe even Division, but I kind of doubt I have time to rebuild it for that. I also have another event recap that I just filmed where I attended the Maker Battle event, which is a 1-pound event in Hartford, Connecticut with my 1-pound bot Sonic, and did pretty well at that one. No spoilers, but you're going to want to make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell icon so you can see how that one went. I'll try and post that event recap next week or next weekend, so it'll be 2 recaps in short succession. And then when I go off to Toronto, there might be a break because there's going to be 2 events in 2 weekends with Bot Brawl and then Teams. So video schedule is going to be interrupted a little bit here and there, but I'll try and find something else to fill the time. All right, that's all I've got for you today. If you like this video, click like. If you want to see more like this, subscribe. And if you want to support me and everything that I'm doing, make sure to check out the Just Cause Robotics Patreon, linked down below. And you can support me there, and you can see all of the fights that Sonic had at Maker Battle right now. That's all I've got for you today. Bye-bye, and thanks for watching.